host. Bill Rader is my name.
Billy, you forget your name, buddy?
It's a long week, Sean. A long week today.
I hear you.
And of course, my co-host Sean Kane. We have a great returning guest this week on this episode. David Whelan comes back, or is it Whelan or Whelan? I never know how to pronounce.
I say Whelan, but I've heard of Whelan.
Whelan.
Yeah.
But if you've seen our episodes before, or heard our episodes on the John Lennon assassination, David has been the one who has been kind of spearheading that investigation into what actually happened. Forget about the official story. There is quite a story where that just doesn't get told, Sean, and David's been trying to get that out there. He's got his book. It's called Mind Games, the assassination of John Lennon, and he's talked to a lot of people. He's interviewed a lot of people. He has just dug as deep as he possibly could into the story, and but he actually didn't come by this week to talk to us about that. We had some other topics. Sean,
that's the good thing about it, Billy. We talked a little bit about it, but we touched on other subjects like the Beatles and all the rumors and gossip around the Beatles. We knocked down a lot of the conspiracy theories that are around them. So we talked about that. We talked about the assassination of Congressman Lowenstein. We talked about MkUltra. We talked about Peter Bourne, Intel operator, and we talked a little bit about Jimmy Carter. So we covered really a variety of topics with him.
Yeah.
And, the focus was a lot of it on MkUltra. So it was a really good conversation with David. And it starts off with the Beatles, Billy.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun. We had fun with David. It was one of those episodes where it was kind of off the cuff. It was a lot of just discussion, and it was really good. It's always fun to have him on.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So anything else, Sean, before we get to the episode?
No, let's get to it, Billy, because this was a good one, buddy.
All right. Let's get a word from one of our sponsors, and then when we come back, we'll be with David Whelan.
Sometimes even good people can make a mistake. And when it happens, it's one of the most intense and emotional experiences of your life. It could be a DUI, or maybe you were in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Or perhaps you just did something stupid at the spur of the moment without even thinking, and now you're in trouble with the law. Well, you need experienced legal help right away so you don't become a victim of the criminal justice system. Even good people can make a mistake, and if you, a friend, or a loved one has been accused of a crime, don't make another mistake by hiring the wrong attorney for the kind of help you need. You need to visit toddjohnslaw.com. That's toddjohnslaw.com, and then call Attorney Todd Johns today. Attorney Todd Johns has decades of experience helping good people like you who have made mistakes or bad decisions and will stand by you every step of the way. toddjohnslaw.com.
Welcome back, David. How you doing?
Hey, Bill. Hey, Sean. Very good, thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Good. Yeah, it's great to have you back.
Great to have you back, Dave.
Always a pleasure.
All right. So, Sean, what I know we got a bunch of topics today. Do you want to start with the Beatles? You want to start with some?
Yeah. Let's start with the Beatles, Dave. We talk a lot about the assassination of Lennon and everything, and let's talk about the band. Let's get into some topics on the band, and then I want to dispel a lot of the myths around the band and the members and stuff. So let's start with that.
Okay, that's a great idea. And of course, when I came out with my investigation a couple of years ago now, 2 or 3 years ago, every time in the comments section, apart from being called a conspiracy theorist most of the time, I get guys popping up and girls popping up with, Tavistock created the Beatles, and Paul is dead, and John faked his death, and these things, and these are really popular myths. I mean, these are
right. Sure.
And you look into the people that are spouting these things, and they seem quite rational. So they've clearly looked into this and they bought it. And it's just something about the Beatles that seems to attract this kind of thing.
Well, we go through this with Marilyn Monroe and the Kennedys. Dave, you know, the same thing. The lies are spread and people believe it and they carry it on.
Yeah, I think the most popular one is the Paul is Dead one, which is
Right. Well, that
from
started back. That started back with the Abbey Road album cover, right? Because for whatever reason, people thought, I don't know, because Paul was the only one who was barefoot.
That's right.
No
That's
idea
right.
why that would mean that he was dead, but
Well, the theory goes that in late November 1966, I think after a Sergeant Pepper session, Paul dies in a car crash. And the theory goes that the Beatles were having such a success across the globe, they thought, well, we can't get off this gravy train. We need to get a replacement in who just happened to look exactly like Paul, could play like Paul, and write songs like Paul. I mean, wow, and sing like him. I mean, what a find! What an incredible find. So this guy, so then the Beatles decide to go along with this thing, but then the theory goes that the Beatles decided to, even though this is obviously a massive secret, they thought it'd be a good idea to drop in clues in their music and their album covers to this alleged event. So, as you say, with Abbey Road, Bill, it's actually quite interesting. See, like, some of these theories are so convoluted, you actually have to kind of marvel at how the people come to this. But the Abbey Road one's interesting because John is dressed in white, so people say, oh, he's the priest. I think who else is that? Ringo's dressed in black, so he's the Undertaker. And then Paul's dressed, Paul's barefoot, so that means, you know, he's a corpse, of course. Why wouldn't it? And George is kind of dressed in a sort of denim shirt, so he's the grave digger. And it's just like, wow, you know. I think if you look at anything in life hard enough, I think if I look at your shelf, Bill, behind you, I could figure out some kind of meaning if I really wanted to. I could kind of, you know what I mean? It's just if your brain wants to go there, it can go there. But what I find interesting is just how enduring these myths are. It's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think for some people, it's just it's entertaining. It just, you know, gives a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit of spice to whatever. But it's just, I think it's funny. And I know that, Dave, I'm sure you've heard this one too, that there's, I forget which song it is, but supposedly if you play one of their songs backwards, it says Paul is dead, Paul is dead.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I think it's Strawberry Fields Forever. And what John says actually is cranberry sauce. But somebody decides to turn that into Paul is dead.
Right.
So it's just, what can you say? I mean, but I think what's interesting about them is, I mean, the Paul is dead one is just so fascinating and such a strange theory that, as you can probably guess, I've looked into it a little bit just because I want to see what I'm up against when these people come out of the woodwork. You know, if someone comes up with a theory for me, I feel obliged to look into it. So, okay, is there anything here? And if there's nothing here, I move on. So there's definitely nothing with Paul is dead. I think we can all agree that logically that's almost impossible. Though there's lots of books out there, guys. People sell a lot of books on this subject. You know, it's amazing. But what I find interesting also about some of the other ones, like the Tavistock created the Beatles, is there are little grains of, not truth, but little clues of why people went down this route. And I think with the Tavistock one, it came down to LSD being introduced into the counterculture into the late 60s. And some of the people that introduced LSD had links to intelligence agencies. And I think what that led people to believe is that maybe Tavistock, which is obviously a British intelligence-linked institution that does a lot of psychological operation stuff, they probably think, well, maybe Tavistock created the Beatles to control youngsters, I think is the theory. But it's kind of like, well you know, yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, how are they controlling? And what's interesting about the Beatles is, and I have studied them a lot. I remember, Bill, you asked on one of your fantastic Patreon shows, you guys discussed this, and you wondered whether I was a Beatles fan, and I wasn't at the time when John died. I was too young. But I've certainly got into them now, and who can't if you love music?
Sure.
And what's interesting about sort of Tavistock and the Beatles is that it purports that people in Tavistock wrote all their songs, or wrote a lot of their songs later on. The Beatles' recording career is one of the most documented recording careers out there. You know, you can buy books that literally have every session documented at Abbey Road. You know, afternoon session, morning session. They wrote the bridge to Eleanor Rigby. Then the next day they wrote, you know, this chorus. It's all documented. We know when they wrote the songs. We know who wrote the songs. We know the musicians that played on those records. So it doesn't take much to find this out, guys. You know, it's just kind of like, where does this Tavistock created the Beatles? I think it just ultimately comes down to lazy people, guys, who just they just like to feel important with an outlandish claim. I think that's part of it, and it gives them some. They feel it gives them some kind of credence that they've got some secret information that the rest of the world doesn't have. That's the only kind of way I can describe how this happens. I just can't get to the bottom of how a mind can rationally believe this.
Well, Dave, it's real similar to the Marilyn Monroe stuff. I mean, we've been looking into that. We have Don McGovern coming on this week, and we look into that, and it's so similar because the people just are throwing this out there, and it's just hearsay that they hear in the streets, and then they're doing it in the mainstream media. They're addressing this stuff, and there's no source. That's the thing that kills you. Nothing is sourced, and then you see that a lot of it comes from this guy that we're going to discuss in an upcoming episode on. He made up these interviews. He made up all these phony interviews after the people were dead. He made sure they were dead, and then he said he had an interview with them before they died, and he didn't. And same thing with the Beatles, very similar. You know, it's just a bunch of nonsense.
It is, and where it becomes a big problem, guys, is around John's murder, because there are two enduring myths around John's murder. The first one is Stephen King did it, and that's a guy called Steve Lightfoot who emerged in the sort of mid-90s, I think, early to mid-90s. And Steve, bless him, thought he was hearing messages and seeing messages in newspapers, secret codes that were telling him that Stephen King killed John Lennon. And you know, obviously Chapman and King do look slightly similar in the famous Paul Goresh photo where John's giving Chapman an autograph. But once people are starting to talk about secret messages in newspapers, I think, you know, you just need to move on. But what's interesting about Steve Lightfoot, which is almost incredible, is he got a lot of coverage in the media in the 90s. You know, he was brought on radio shows. And I still, even recently, that up to the last couple of years, he was brought on some Californian radio shows where they just literally bring Steve on to rant about everything you can imagine. You know, every conspiracy going, Steve's on it. But the Lennon Stephen King thing is his big thing. And this caused Stephen King a lot of upset. You know, this guy stalked Stephen King. I think Stephen King had to take out some legal action against him. You know, this is for Stephen and his family, it must have been absolutely awful, this whole episode. But what it does is, guys, when someone like me who comes up with a proper investigation with proper research and documentation and interviewing everybody involved, I just instantly get dismissed as, oh, you probably think Stephen King did it. You know, and it's kind of, I don't think these guys are promoted deliberately. I just think it's a lazy media who allow guys like this airtime. And it, you know, we just need to be a little bit more careful about how we do that. And the second enduring myth is that John faked his death, which again, is just like, why would he do that? I mean, he's got a 5-year-old son who he adores. He's just made an album that's been well received. He's got a world tour coming up in 1981. Why would he do that? Why would he fake his death and go and hide on an island? Again, two lines of logic and it's dismissed. But yeah, it endures. Very strange.
Yeah, I don't know, that same island, David. I think Elvis is there. Right? Jimi Hendrix. And,
that's right.
Jim Morrison. They're all there.
I wouldn't mind going on a holiday on that island. It'd be a great band in the bar, wouldn't it? It'd be amazing. Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there is a serious point here. The serious point is all this noise just gets around what you guys are trying to do. You know, trying to get to the truth of things. You know, and it's the noise. It does. And it's the noisy, crazy people who tend to get pushed to the front, yeah, we get mixed up.
Like I always said, Dave, we've been, when we get called the conspiracy theorists, I always say we debunk more conspiracies than we prove.
You do.
90% of them, maybe 99% of them are just nonsense, you know. Yeah. But it's hard, like you said, to prove that 1-2% that is true conspiracy when you got all this noise around you. It makes your job difficult.
I think also, guys, when you got something like MkUltra,
yeah,
where, you know, we know it existed, we know they were messing with people's minds, we know people came out of that program very damaged. I think if you're having mental health issues and you have maybe some family connections to the military or intelligence, and you're in a particular location where that work may have gone on, it's very easy for you to believe you may have been a victim of that, and maybe some of them are.
Sure.
And the reason I say this is I'm not going to give this woman publicity. I'm not going to say what her theory is, but basically a woman came out onto my platform about 6 months ago saying that a very famous pop star, in fact, I'll say it, she said that Leonard Cohen assassinated John Lennon, right? And that she was part of the MkUltra program in Canada. Now, she may have been part of the MkUltra in Canada. She's Canadian, and the kind of timeline kind of fits. But if you're going to take out John Lennon, you are not going to send in 1980 a very well-known, famous singer to pull the trigger. To pull the trigger, it's just, again, the logic test is quite simple. You're not going to send Leonard Cohen to do the job. So, but yeah, you know, this woman, I genuinely believe this woman believes it, and she apparently knew Leonard and had a relationship with him. I don't know about any of that, but it's kind of because I've investigated this for so long, and I feel I know this murder more than I really should. For my good health, really. I know Leonard Cohen wasn't there pulling the trigger. That's for sure. I think someone would have surely spotted him. So yeah, this is what we're up against, guys, and it's a problem. It's a big problem.
But I think it's also hard for the average person to understand MkUltra and a lot of these intelligence operations. I think the three of us, you know, we've been doing this for a while. We understand these intelligence operations, but then to explain it to somebody else, you know, it's hard for the average person to understand them. It really is, because they're very complex and they do a lot of things just to distract.
You're right, Sean. And I remember something you said, which I often use in my arguments now, where people come up with that classic Occam's razor thing. And I remember something you said to someone once, and it's brilliant. You just said, look, you know, when intelligence agencies pull these things together, it's anything but simple. It's anything but the straightforward answer. You know, they're planned within an inch of their lives, and they're planned to deceive and to be deceptive and to be labyrinth and to be undetectable. So it's just not always, you know, Occam's razor is just ridiculous. I can see why people cling on to that particular theory. It just makes life so simple. And also another thing, Sean, when you start to explain to people about, you know, MkUltra and similar programs and what intelligence agencies did and may still be doing, of course, because it's secret, it's for our own good, it has to be staying secret. You know, I don't know about you guys, but I look at some of my friends and family, and I can see they're just really upset and disturbed by this kind of stuff, you know, and they just don't want to go there. You know, they want to kind of,
right. No, and believe it.
And if you're a young person, you know what, I kind of get that. You know, you're young, you want to see the world in a promising way, and you want to, you know, you don't want to think about all these dark, shadowy figures and institutions that have done bad stuff and may still be doing bad stuff. You just want to go out to a pop concert. You want to go and take your date down for a restaurant. You just don't want to be, you know, mulling over this stuff. And I fully get that. I really do get that. But I think when you get older and you have kids and you have responsibilities and you have a, you know, a more critically thinking mind, I think you should really, I think you've got a responsibility for your own, for the future generations to come, to try and spread this kind of truth out there so people can understand what's happened and what may yet still happen. So for me, it's a responsibility thing, and I'm sure you guys feel the same. You know, it's a mission.
We will be right back.
DK's Corner has moved. Come see us in our brand new location at 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania, right across from the Jessup Plaza. Enjoy a brand new menu with hot and cold sandwiches, soups, salads, pizza, delicious breakfast, including breakfast bowls and sandwiches, specialty coffees, and DK's famous Razzle Dazzle flavor shaken espressos, and still the best cheesesteaks around. Follow DK's Corner on Facebook and Instagram, or call them at 570-209-0278 to find out about their daily specials and catering. And DK's Corner now has beautiful outdoor seating for the summer. Don't feel like leaving the house? Call DK's Corner for delivery. And we thank DK's Corner for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You. DK's Corner, now in Jessup, Pennsylvania. That's Enough Out of You is also sponsored by MkULtra Winery, featuring over 20 flavors of wine, from dry red, dry white, and fruit for your sampling pleasure. MkULtra Winery offers entertainment, parties, and private events. Now serving a full menu with a little something for everyone, including appetizers, salads, dinners, pizza, and desserts. MkULtra has some of the best live entertainment in the area, with comedy and karaoke nights and live bands. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram for all of our upcoming events. And if you mention the code OUTA, that's OUTTA, you get 15% off of your order. Located on Main Street in Peckville, Pennsylvania, call 570-382-3855 for more information. And we thank Case Quattro Winery for their support.
It's a mission. It's absolutely a mission. And the other thing, Dave, I just want to add is that when you're talking about the people that come up with these operations, like an Alan Dulles, a James Angleton, Sidney Gottlieb, but the MkUltra program, you're talking about very, very intelligent people, the cream of the crop out of Ivy League schools. So, I mean, they're coming up with these operations, and these black operators are skilled and very well trained. So, I mean, you're talking about the cream of the crop here. You're not talking about some guy in the street they plucked.
You are, and I know this could be a good segue into Jimmy Carter, but talking of Black Ops, Sean, I've been reading Craig Unger's book about the October Surprise, and he was talking about Stansfield Turner taking over at the CIA, I believe in 78, 79. And there was one line that really sort of struck out for me, and it was basically Craig saying that Stansfield, I think he sacked 850 Black Op operatives from the CIA when he first got in there. And I just thought 850 is an incredible, what did those 850 guys go and do in 78? You know, what did they go and work down the local grocery? I mean, what were they up to? Did they go and work a bar? So, you know, they're out there doing stuff. And then I just thought how we just become so familiar and comfortable with the words Black Ops.
Mm-hmm.
That should any sort of free and open democracy, there should be no Black Ops.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Everything's got to be on the record. Everything has to be checked and overseen. But of course, we know that's not the case. It's probably still not the case now. In fact, I'm certain it's still not the case now.
It's definitely not.
You know, it's secret for our own good. So, so that worries me. And again, with the Lennon thing, you know, I wonder whether one of those 850 Black Op guys who lost their jobs in 78, a couple of years later, were hanging around New York, maybe. You know, you just wonder. You know, they had to do something.
Yeah, it's like when I hear, you know, they're retired or ex-CIA, there's no such thing. It's a club you join. It's not like a country club you're joining, you know what I mean? And you're paying about a month. I mean, once you're in, you're in.
Yeah, agreed.
Before we go on, because I do want to get to Jimmy Carter and the passing of Jimmy Carter, Bill, is there anything else you want to talk about as far as the Beatles?
No, I mean, whatever the myths that are out there, I think they're just ridiculous. It's people want to try to explain how these guys could have been so creative and so amazing. Like, it's almost superhuman, right? When you think about it, David, the music that they created together. You couldn't, I mean, you and I could do, if we were alive for the next 200 years, we couldn't come up with, that type of music. So people need to rationalize it somehow. They need to come up with some sort of an explanation as to how that could be. And the fact of the matter is they were four very, very talented, some more than others. John and Paul probably more so than others, but George and Ringo did some great work also. But people have to figure out in their minds, have to try to figure out and rationalize, how could these guys be so much better and so much more talented and see the world in such a different way than everybody else. And that's how you do it. You make up shit to try to explain it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Genius is mystifying, Bill.
It absolutely is. Absolutely is. You're right. Yeah.
So let's go on to I want to talk about, we just had the passing of President Jimmy Carter, and what a great humanitarian and just a great person, a great human being Jimmy Carter was. But as far as his presidency, he was surrounded by a lot of people, the Rockefellers and Reagan and Bush and all these people. And I want to talk about, Dave, you got something on the October surprise. Let's talk about that. But I also want to talk about Peter Bourne. So let's go there. Wow.
Okay. I was, as part of my Lennon assassination research, I was looking to see if there were any other MkUltra-esque murders in New York or anywhere in the world, actually, that sort of had similar echoes of a kind of MkUltra hit. And Al Lowenstein came into my focus. And Al Lowenstein was a a Democrat politician. He was a fascinating guy, liberal guy, very comfortable upbringing, very well connected. Didn't really cut it when it came to success. He lost a lot of elections. Very much a kind of on the fringes kind of guy, but a very connected guy. And in, I think it was March 1980, one of his ex sort of pupils came into his office at Rockefeller Plaza. It's always Rockefeller Plaza, same building that Jonathan Mark Chapman's lawyer worked out of.
Yeah.
Something about that building. And this guy walked into Al Lowenstein's office and shot him 5 or 6 times. Sometimes it differs how many times. Walks back out into the office where the secretary was sitting, sits down, puts his gun down, and gets out a cigarette and starts smoking. And then the gun is taken away by a third party. Again, I just thought, wow, another Lennon-esque echo. And various unidentified witnesses kind of said, yeah, he kind of went in and did it, but there was a telephone installer. Apparently he was in the office. No one knows to this day who that telephone installer was, but he laid down a lot of the story at that point, a bit like apparently Jose Padermo did for the Lennon murder. And I just thought, wow, who is this guy? Who's this guy, Dennis? I think his name is Dennis Sweeney.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I looked into Sweeney, and he was, again, like Mark Chapman. He wasn't just this kind of crazy guy who snapped. He had a very rich, interesting life. And he had a life where he believed instructions and voices and all kinds of things were being fed into his brain. And bless him, poor old Dennis Sweeney thought that it was a transmitter in his teeth that he believed that a dentist put into his teeth back in the early 60s when he was working for the civil rights movement under Al Lowenstein's kind of edict. And he went to see a dentist, and he believed that this dentist put in a transmitter in his teeth. Now, for me, I'm not quite sure I buy the sort of that kind of tech being put into a human being's body in the early 60s. It's possible. Anything's possible. Dennis may have just been a guy with mental health issues. I'm sure that's definitely the case. But what's interesting is that Dennis married a woman called Mary King when he was down in the South working in the civil rights movement. And what's interesting about Mary King is she divorced Dennis and married another guy called Peter Bourne. And Peter Bourne is a British guy with Australian heritage who seemed to have an annoying habit of just going to universities or working in places where MkUltra was rife, such as Stanford and the clinic, the very famous clinic, Haight-Ashbury Clinic in San Francisco, where Charles Manson was being worked on by Dr. Jolene West. And I just thought, wow, this guy just seems to just constantly wander into MkUltra facilities as Peter Bourne. And then I discovered that Peter Bourne, amazingly, helped to create and promote Jimmy Carter, as did Peter Bourne's father, Jeffrey Bourne, who was a special operations executive guy, which is the early MI5 outfit after the Second World War, who obviously had connections to the CIA when they were formed at the same time. And so his father, Jeffrey Bourne, and Peter Bourne were pretty much the kind of instigators into making Jimmy Carter run for his presidency after being the governor in Georgia. So I just thought, also, Peter Bourne was working out of Emory University, which is just a few miles away, interestingly, from Mark Chapman. And again, like Stanford, had MkUltra documented experiments going on. So I just thought this Peter Bourne guy is just a very strange, nefarious man who clearly is a British agent. I mean, he's clearly, there's other, I mean, we could be all day talking about Peter Bourne. He went to Vietnam where he shouldn't have been there and he got lots of awards and medals when he came out of Vietnam. He hangs out in clubs in London where, they are basically intelligence clubs where we know the intelligence community hang out. So, Peter Bourne's an agent. There's no doubt about that.
Well, Dave, the Jason Bourne movies are loosely based on Peter Bourne, correct?
Well, this is the thing, Sean. When I did the research, I kept thinking Bourne. I said, this guy literally is Jason Bourne, and we all know what the Jason Bourne character is about. Sure. He's a programmed assassin who's linked to MkUltra. So I kind of just parked that and thought, no, that's just too crazy. That's too out there. But Peter Bourne's got a bit of an ego. And a few years ago, he did a very big website, which is now taken offline, but thankfully archive.org still has this website. And in there, bless him, Peter put a blog on there saying that his father met the is it Ludlam, isn't it? The Jason Bourne author. I believe it's Ludlam, Robert
I
Ludlam.
think so, yeah.
Yeah, I met him and said to him, this Jason Bourne character is very much kind of like my son. You know, it's got a lot of echoes. My son was he was a kind of military vet. My son was, you know, had similar echoes to your character. And Ludlam just came out and said, yeah, it was based on your son. It was based on Peter Bourne. It was based on, yeah, I based Jason Bourne on your son. And Jason, and bless him, Peter Bourne was quite proud of this and put it in his, put it on his blog and his website and said, I'm the real Jason Bourne. Yeah, this guy's got a massive ego, but he's just got this kind of Forrest Gump life where he just wanders through all these amazing adventures. And he became Jimmy Carter's drug czar, and eventually got caught taking drugs in the White House. Eventually got caught giving Quaaludes to, which is a kind of hypnotic drug, to White House staffers, and that was kind of what did him in the end. And he finally got sacked from the Carter administration. But then he went to work for the World Health Organization, you know, and the United Nations. So this guy's just a serial kind of insider at the top table. And no matter what he did, you know, you could be a drug czar and take drugs and still survive. You know, so incredible Teflon guy who just nothing stuck. He just always kept moving up, up, up and up. But what I found fascinating is the Carter link. It's just kind of like, you know, I'm sure it was just a coincidence that he pushed Carter to the presidency. But what's really odd, guys, is why no one knows about this. Why this guy? I wrote a big article about it on Substack, and it took me nearly a year to research it. You know, I had to read a lot of books, and I had to kind of go really deep into this Peter Bourne guy, because I just thought this guy's just too fascinating not to explore. And I'll just finish with this one last thing, guys, is that Mary King, Dennis Sweeney's first wife, the woman who then went on to marry Peter Bourne, said that in her autobiography, when she was talking about the civil rights movement and Dennis Sweeney's hearing voices in his head episode after seeing a dentist down in the South when he was married to Mary, Mary said, oh yeah, I remember at the time there was sort of 4 or 5 other incidents just like that. And I just thought, hang on a minute, 4 or 5 other instances just like that? What do you mean there were 4 or 5 other people at the same time in that location who were hearing voices in their head? That's not a coincidence. That's a bit of a program. That's a bit of a pattern. So
Yeah.
that to me was a big tell. And I just thought, with her connection to Peter Bourne and Peter Bourne's connections to MkUltra facilities, of course, there's no proof that Peter Bourne and Mary King are anywhere involved in anything nefarious, and that Dennis Sweeney was programmed by them or anything like that. But there's a hell of a lot of strange smoke, guys, around these people. And I think there might be a little bit of fire somewhere. But, you know, someone like Peter Bourne, clearly protected, clearly can do whatever he like take cocaine at the White House and just, you know, and move up the NGO ladder with as did Mary as well, by the way. You know, these people traveled all over the world. I think Mary boasted that she'd been in something like 60 countries. Doing her work for the government. And you just sort of think, well, was Mary an agent like Peter was an agent, like Peter's dad was an agent? You know, you just think, and what are these people doing circling Jimmy Carter? You know, it's just absolutely bizarre. And why has the media never picked up on it? Very strange.
We will be right back.
And we would like to thank our sponsor, Gracious Day Grains. Sean, you like to eat healthy, don't you?
Always, buddy. I try to eat healthy as much as I can.
Yeah, and there is nothing healthier than what they call like farm to table, right? So when you can get something right from the ground and make it and then put it right on your table. And Gracious Day Grains, they have a tremendous selection, and it's totally organic. Everything is, you know, they don't use any sort of herbicides or pesticides or anything like that. They have a bunch of different products on their website, Gracious Day Grains. So if you go to graciousdaymilling.com, you'll find a bunch of great stuff there, Sean.
Yeah, you will, Billy. And it's owned by Tom Maxey, who's a great guy from Virginia. He's a truth seeker, just like me and you, buddy. And Tom's growing philosophy follows the wisdom of farmers of centuries past. And a quote from Tom is, if we practice the right rotations, we exclude the bugs and weeds without needing herbicides or pesticides. So, I mean, this is great, Billy. I mean, what he's doing is fantastic.
There's cornbread mix, there's cornmeal, popcorn he sells, buckwheat Sean, have you had buckwheat pancakes?
No, buddy.
Oh my, they're delicious. I love buckwheat pancakes. And Gracious Day Grain sells buckwheat pancakes. Just go to their website and you'll be able to find all of this stuff there. You can order it right off the website. You can find out all about how they farm and their whole philosophy, Tom's philosophy. It's great stuff.
It really is, Billy. And one of the things he does is he grinds small batches at very low temperatures, which retains the flavor and the freshness.
Of course. And it can't get any fresher than that. I mean, it's literally right from the ground. So again, go to graciousdaymilling.com and just, take a look on there. You can order whatever you want and they'll send it right to your door. Again, it doesn't get any fresher than that, right from Tom's farm to your door to your table. So
absolutely. And eat healthy and you'll feel better.
Absolutely. I wish I could do that. I wish I could eat healthier, Sean.
Well, start with Tom's stuff, buddy.
I'm going to order some of those buckwheat pancakes. I love
There you go. I'm going to try them too, Billy.
Yeah, they're really good. All right. Gracious Day. We thank Gracious Day Grains for their sponsorship.
Thank you. I want to do a little more on that. I want to really go a deep dive onto people around Carter and even the October surprise I want to get into. But come back to the Lowenstein assassination.
Yeah, please.
His last words were, "Did they get the guy?" Like he didn't say that Dennis Sweeney did it. He said, "Did they get the guy?" Which is very odd, that he didn't bring.
That's right. You're right. You're right, Sean. And he knew his alleged assassin, Dennis, for decades. And they'd known each other for a long, long time.
Right.
And Al Lowenstein's secretary knew this. So when Al Lowenstein's secretary, when Dennis Sweeney exited Al's office and sat down and started smoking a cigarette and his gun was taken away conveniently, she ran in, this secretary, and Al Lowenstein's lying there and said to her, "Did they get the guy who did it?" Now, Al Lowenstein knew, as did Al Lowenstein's secretary, exactly who Dennis Sweeney was. So that's very, very strange. And the one thing that the secretary did also reveal in my research is that the telephone installer was in the room when they were in the room. This so-called mysterious telephone installer, who then after the murder gave all the details about how he walked in and he shot him and he came out and he was cool as a cucumber and he sat there smoking a cigarette, all the rest of it, all came from this so-called still unnamed telephone installer. Wow. So it's the echoes to the Chapman Lennon case are very, very strong. Very strong. Very similar.
Absolutely. But Bill, you got anything or do you want to go on to
Oh no, keep going.
Let's talk more about Jimmy Carter because like I said before, a great human being, but as a president, he was really surrounded by, the Rockefellers and Brzezinski and people like that. And just, and then you bring up Peter Bourne. But let's talk about the October surprise, Dave, and Reagan and Bush. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think people often say to me, guys, how could, Reagan as an administration do something awful as, or even just, let's just say Reagan sympathizers or Reagan supporters think about orchestrating a murder of John Lennon? How could such wonderful people do such a thing? And I say to them, well, were they wonderful? Because the October surprise is pretty much all out of the bag now. It's pretty much documented. I
don't think you can even deny it now.
No, you can't deny it. And it's kind of corruption at possibly the highest level. It's beyond belief that you could rig an election like that. And it's beyond belief that some guys who weren't even in government, people like William Casey, who were not politicians, could work behind the scenes to deal with the Iranian government, to promise them weapons at a future date after Reagan wins the election, if Reagan wins the election. Right. Because they were very concerned, obviously, that if the Iranian hostages, the American Iranian hostages were released before the election, it'll be seen as a great boost for Carter's upcoming election hopes. And they thought that might give Carter the bounce he needs to get across the line. So while the hostage crisis was still rumbling on, Reagan can be the guy that can say, yeah, I'm the one that's going to fix all this. I'm going to solve it. Carter's a lame duck. He couldn't fix the Iranian problem. And of course, what's absolutely almost comical, and I would say it's almost like an ego thing. I think they did it on purpose. The timing must have been a message to people that look what we can do, because literally as Ronald was in his inauguration speech and as he was being sworn in, guys, on the steps, I think literally 5 minutes later, the news just crossed to an airfield in Tehran with the American hostages getting on planes flying home, and it was just like, wow, you know, it's theatre, pure theatre. It was obviously all times within an inch of its life, and you just sort of think, wow, you know, that's kind of treason, really. I can think of no other word to describe it. You know, they made those hostages potentially be, you know, kept in captivity for probably another 6 to 9 months when they didn't need to be. When they didn't need to be, and it's just shocking. And then you know, there was an arms embargo with Iran at the time. You know, it was a serious enemy, a sworn enemy of the American people at the time, and there was an arms embargo, obviously, where you couldn't give arms to these people because they were a sworn enemy to the American people. Yet these people, in secret, did an arms deal behind the American public and the American government's back to secure Ronald's election victory. And I say to people like Casey, Rumsfeld, Cheney, all these dark characters that were in the background pulling these kind of strings. Do you honestly think people that them or people that support them and made those kind of guys happen, do you think those kind of guys would have any problem pulling a hit on John Lennon? You know, I don't think so. I don't think so.
You know, Dave, our problems with Iran really go back to the CIA's coup in 53 in Mossadegh in Iran. And that led to the problems. And then after this, of course, you get down the road after the hostages, you get the Iran-Contra, which was just an unbelievable scandal, the highest levels. But when you're talking about Reagan, though, you have to ask yourself, how much was he really in control? Was he just a figurehead, or was Bush running the thing? And then that leads to the obvious assassination attempt on Reagan, where you tie, you know, Hinckley is tied to the Bush family, and he's also got MkUltra ties. So you have to wonder that, Dave, you know, how much actual control were these people behind the scenes really running things, and was good old Ron just waving his hand and smiling and giving all these great speeches as an actor, as a trained actor that he was, and behind the scenes, he really didn't know.
I think he was I think he was an actor. You know, I mean, Ronald Reagan. I think we'd all agree on this, guys. I think if we went out for a beer with Ronald Reagan, we'd all come out of that bar that night saying, "Wow, that's one of the greatest guys we've ever met."
Sure.
What a fantastic guy! I mean, he had it. He just oozed charisma.
He was the giver.
But yeah, exactly. But you know, he wasn't really. How can we put it? He was. Listen, the guy had his beliefs. Okay, his beliefs were very right wing. Okay, I don't think he was extreme right wing. I don't think he was a fascist. He believed communism was an evil that needed to be rooted out. He may have a point. I'm not a big fan of communism. I don't think communism worked very well in the Soviet Union. So I can see why people like Ronald would see that and go, I don't want America to become that. I get that. I didn't like the witch hunts, the McCarthy witch hunts, all that stuff. I think that was all done. Terrible. That was way too extreme. But, you know, Ronald believed what Ronald believed in. But this whole October surprise thing and Iran-Contra and all the rest of it, it makes me believe now that people like Reagan and Biden, let's be honest, people like Boris Johnson, you know, an absolute idiot. You know, how can people like Boris Johnson run anything, really? I mean, the guy is an absolute idiot. And I'm beginning to sort of think more now, guys, looking at Reagan and Biden, obviously the last few years of his administration probably wasn't making too many decisions. And I'm starting to think, are a lot of our leaders actors of some kind, you know, people who are just there, figureheads, maybe it's a nicer, kinder way to describe them.
We've said before that after the Kennedy assassination, the president really has been just a figurehead. You know, the office of the presidency was assassinated that day, as well as the man. And the presidency really has been a figurehead with people behind the scenes running it, the military, the intelligence community, you know, oligarchs, in what, you know, the deep state, that people don't want to talk about that because Trump has destroyed that term, you know, but that's typically what it is.
Yeah, I agree. And by Trump, yeah, you're right. He has destroyed that term very cleverly.
I don't know if it was clever. I think it was just the way he just, everything he touches, he destroys. But I mean,
that's true. That's true. Yeah, yeah. Maybe me putting the words clever and Donald Trump in the same sentence was a little bit. That's pushing it a bit. But again, a guy who you know, if ever there's anyone who's got skeletons in the cupboard and can be easily controlled, it's Donald Trump, you know, and
Sure.
potentially Reagan was the same. I think, and there's always been a lot of whispers that people like Tony Blair had a lot of skeletons in the closet, and Johnson, you know, how many children by how many wives, how many girlfriends, you know, who knows what that guy got up to that we don't know about. So I just wonder, are all our leaders around the world compromised to some degree to have some kind of control or leverage over them? It's such a cynical, horrible thing to think. But then when you look at things in history and you just look at Reagan and you just think, Reagan why would Reagan need to know about that? You know, I just don't think, I think they could have organized, well, we know they did it in secrecy.
Sure.
So I just don't think they'd have sat down Ron and go, look, Ronald, we're going to pull off this thing with the Iranians. We're going to give them loads of secret weapons. I'm not sure Reagan would have sanctioned that, to be honest with you. I don't think he would
It
have
goes
done
back to Alan Dulles when he was doing all these assassinations and regime changes. I mean, how many of them were really sanctioned by the presidency? I mean, there may be possibly the Patrice Lumumba you may have been got the okay from Eisenhower, but that's even skeptical. But Dulles he was not following orders from the president. He was carrying out his own national security and foreign policy. You know, and all these assassinations. I mean, you know, Mossadegh in Iran and you know, all of them, the Dominican Republic, I mean, Guatemala,
so many,
Arben,
so many. Allende, Chile.
I mean,
yeah, it's terrifying. It's when you actually look into all that, it's such a dark period of history. And you do wonder, guys, is it still going on? You know, is it still going on? Who knows? You know, the media. Yeah, I don't think the media are going to tell us. That's for sure.
No.
I think the media now are pretty much defunct now, really, when it comes to breaking those kind of stories to the world or revealing something that we don't know. It's just the same old bogeyman, isn't it? You know, when Biden was in power, the bogeyman was Russia. I notice now Donald's about to take the reins. The bogeyman is Islamists. It flip flops. You know, let's just pick a new bogeyman for the military-industrial complex to up their budgets for. And you know, I see it in this country. It's the same in this country, same in the UK. Just looking for bogeymen, looking for fear. There's a fantastic documentary by a guy in the UK, and it's called The Power of Nightmares. And it was basically a UK BBC documentary filmmaker. His name won't come to me now, but I'm sure it will in a minute. Adam Curtis. And he basically said that, you know, in the 40s and 50s, what politicians sold to us then, guys, was dreams. It said, look, you know, we're going to give you a better life. You're going to get more money. You're going to get more security. It's, you know, you're going to get better health, better towns and cities to live in. And then they suddenly realized after the Cold War that it was actually easier to sell fear and sell nightmares and sell, you know, get people in line. Right. And, you know, and play the card that we're not going to sell you dreams. We're going to sell you protection. We're going to protect you from all these horrible things that are going to happen. And of course, that made a lot of money for the military-industrial complex and for the intelligence agencies who I think, you know, run those military-industrial complexes. So, yeah, this is becoming a very depressing episode, guys, for such an early week in sort of 2025. I sort of want to start the year in a more kind of you know, upbeat, positive way. But do you know what? The only way for me personally, knowing all this stuff about Mossadegh and Allende and October Surprise and Iran, all of it, and guys, there's plenty of UK stuff as well. Please, I really don't got to stress this. The UK has got just as much corruption and dodgy dealings when it comes to politics. But sure. The only way to deal with it sometimes, guys, is just to switch it off. You know, if you think, I mean, what you guys do on this show, it must be hard. You must need to have a few beers after.
This is why we switch up, Dave, and we add in a little sports and
yeah,
and
it's good.
We do the question episodes, kind of lighten up the mood and stuff like that.
Got to.
It does get depressing. It really does.
It does, because it's the more you learn, it's kind of. And, you know, someone recently sort of said to me, you know, what good can come of your investigation? You know, there won't be a reinvestigation. You know that the DA's office are not going to look into this again. Why are you doing this? It's just going to make you feel bad and depressed. And on one level, I kind of agree with them. I go, yeah, you're right. It does make me feel depressed and annoyed and sad and frustrated. But then I counter to them, once you know this stuff, how can anyone possibly just sit on it and bury it and not try and, you know, talk about it and work out a way of making sure we make the world a better place and make democracy true and you know, something worth believing in.
And once you know it, also, David, also makes you question everything else. right?
It does.
That's
And
a good point.
Really good point, Bill. And I think that's kind of where these people who think, you know, Stephen King killed John Lennon, or the Earth is flat, or chemtrails are being sprayed on us to change our personalities. I think all of these people are sprouted from the Zapruder film. I genuinely believe that. I believe they see the Zapruder film, clearly a guy getting shot in the front of his head. Okay, clearly being shot from the front. Take your pick, from the bridge or the grassy knoll. Take your pick. He's getting shot from the front.
Yeah,
physics, the physics show you that. And yet they go to Wikipedia and they're told a guy shot him from behind hundreds of yards away. And they go, well, if they're lying about that, and they know anyone can see they're lying about that, well, they must be lying about other stuff. So what other stuff are they lying about?
And see, this is the problem, though, is where people take everything to the extreme. So you have the media and the government saying there's no conspiracies, and then you have all these other people saying everything is a conspiracy. And the thing is, both of those statements are not true.
Correct.
I mean, some things
it's not binary,
and then a lot of things are not a conspiracy. You know, so you have to look at each case and look at the evidence and do a deep dive on everything. And it's really hard to explain to people, you know, because they take a stand on either side, and when the answer's in the middle, Dave, and you know this, it's hard to get people that are on the extreme, right, left, to look in the middle.
It's a really good point. It's not binary. You know, to be a conspiracy denier is ridiculous. Clearly, conspiracies have been proven to have existed.
Sure.
And
but not everything is a conspiracy.
But to be exactly a conspiracy absolutist is also ridiculous. You know, and you need to get a grip. And just think about it logically. Just get that whole critical thinking going and go, okay, is this logical? Does this make sense to me? Is that guy getting shot on that film being shot from the back? No, he's not.
I don't know how anybody can say that. And then you have all these. We know that all these doctors and hospital personnel now. I think it's over 75 people that said the back of the head was blown out on Kennedy. So that's definitely a shot from the front. I mean, anybody who knows anything about guns and long distance shooting will tell you that. So I mean, it's really ridiculous to say that one guy from the back did this killing. And this is what it goes back to Carlos Hathcock, who was the greatest sniper really in American history, at least in the Vietnam War era. And he tried to replicate that, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. The greatest sniper, and the reason he couldn't do it, Dave, is because you can't, shoot somebody from the back and the front at the same time.
Yeah.
He couldn't replicate those shots. And a lot of people don't understand that. It's not that he couldn't hit the target from that distance, because he could have easily. He's hit longer targets. You know, it was just the way that shots happened. You know, there was no doubt about it. And two of them are almost on top of each other. So it's like ridiculous to even think that. You know, you have the magic bullet, which I don't know how anybody could believe in the magic. Arlen Specter didn't even believe in the magic bullet, and he came up with it.
Yeah, I mean, even the word magic. Sorry, game over. I mean, that whole Kennedy thing. It still makes me angry when I think too much about it. But I kind of, in a way, I'm grateful that we've got the Zapruder film, because I think if the Zapruder film wasn't there, I think we still would have people writing books and looking into Oswald and his links to the CIA, etc. And there's we all know how deep that JFK rabbit hole goes. But for me, the Zapruder film was the kind of, oh yeah, okay. Now I wish there was a Zapruder film in the Lennon case, that's for sure. There certainly was. There was no. I mean, as far as I know, it wasn't filmed. Though interestingly, across the road from the Dakota was a massive building called the Majestic, I believe it was called, where there was something like 500 windows, 500 apartments. So if somebody wanted to film that driveway that night, I'm sure it would have been very easily pulled off. But yeah, I think getting back to the media and them not doing their job properly. Recently, I uncovered a music magazine called the NME.
Talk about that, Dave.
Yeah, it's amazing. They did a 3-part series in the summer of 1981. Just extraordinary research, and this series was just buried for 44 years until I found it last year. And they nailed it. They said, look, there's some really disturbing far right Christian guys circling Chapman in the South, and there's a lot of kind of Christian militia, military guys who are around Decatur and Georgia, who are kind of got horrible links to far right Christian military training camps. Would you believe? I mean, just incredible people. There's a guy called Mitch Werbo, who's a kind of Christian terrorist kind of guy, and he's famous for throwing out poisoned rats out of his helicopter in Vietnam. These are the kind of psychopaths who were preaching Jesus's word. It's almost comical, really. So they got that one. They got that one right in episode 1. Then episode 2, they uncovered all MkUltra. They went straight into that, and they asked why Bernard Diamond was in Mark Chapman's cell. They didn't actually know about Milton Klein at that point. That Milton Klein was actually a consultant on the Manchurian Candidate program. I think they'd have really gone to town if they'd have realized that he also walked into Mark Chapman's cell. And then in the third part, they did the most incredible thing, guys. They got an interview with Barnett Salzman. And Barnett Salzman, for me, is the final piece in the jigsaw for me. He's the guy that worked at Castle Memorial Hospital, which was the mental health institute in Hawaii that Mark Chapman was in. And he basically said, yeah, they were brainwashing him. They were using Thorazine. They were using other mind-altering drugs. And he was on a mind control program. And he named the doctor. He named the period when they were doing it. And Barnett Salzman said for his whistleblowing in Castle Memorial, he was sacked. So he did it. He gave an interview to the NME. I've done a big article on my Substack about this, and he lays it all out. And the rest of the world's media did absolutely nothing. It wasn't followed up. Barnett just disappeared. Totally ignored. Barnett disappeared. Yeah, it is amazing. And Barnett disappeared into history. I've recently got in contact with Barnett's daughter, and incredibly, I don't think it's sinister, but it's just such an interesting coincidence that Barnett's, all of his paperwork, all of his archive, which apparently was quite substantial, was lost in the LA fires. His house burnt down and everything's gone. So that interview that Barnett gave to the NME is probably the most valuable piece of intel that we've got, that Mark Chapman was being brainwashed at Castle Memorial Hospital, and that they were the people there, or one of the doctors was there and putting him on this program in 78, where, remember guys, he was sent off to Japan to bump into John Lennon and his family, which again has never been picked up by the media. I think I revealed that about a year ago.
That's a great find, yeah.
No one wants to know. And Barnett Salzman, his daughter asked me, is there any video? Is there any audio? I think there's some audio, radio stuff he did, which I'm trying to track down, which would be great. Love to get hold of that. But, even his own family, once that fire destroyed everything, they're really desperate to get some more information on their father. So, yeah, it's the media. It's just, I don't know what to say, guys. I come from mainstream media, and I'm just really dismayed at the cowardice of the media landscape at the moment. And I get it. They don't want to be tarnished with, Steve Lightfoot, Stephen King killed John Lennon type people. But as you said just a minute ago, Sean, it's not binary. Not all conspiracy theories are true, and some are true. And people just need to grow up a little bit and start to not be so scared of that phrase.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It goes back to the CIA with Alan Dulles, what they did with that term, conspiracy theorist, and they weaponized that term. And
they did.
See that today.
I mean, I think we know the media is bought and paid for, David. There's no question about that. But I mean, why would you not investigate, even just to disprove it? Why would you not investigate?
Yeah, for sure. I got a piece in the Mail Online a couple of years ago, 2 pieces actually, but that was only through me knowing someone who worked there. They weren't coming for me. I had to use someone that I knew in there to push the story. Fair play to them. They looked at all my evidence and went, yeah, this is worth doing. And they did 2 pieces, one on my investigation and one on the 2 different types of bullets that were found in John Lennon. And a German paper did a follow-up. I believe the New York Post did a follow-up. And that's it, guys. That was it. No Washington Post, no Sunday Times, no Guardian, no.
You guys got to remember, though, the media is corporate. It's owned. So these guys, these journalists today, they're getting their orders from the top. Like Washington Post is owned by Bezos now. So, I mean, you're talking about the richest people, the oligarchs. They control the media. They control the newspapers, the networks.
Musk and X, they control. Yeah, they control social media, Sean. Musk
and that too, and then social media with Musk and Twitter and
Yeah, it's deeply unhealthy, isn't it? It's a really unhealthy landscape at the moment. And guys like you doing incredible work are being trolled. You're not being allowed to, build the audiences I believe you should be building.
Well, and that's the problem, David. We talked about that on the Patreon that we have out today on our speakeasy. That, to reach some of these videos, I look at some of these videos and you take there's a video that I talking about JFK and the garbage on the mafia fixing the election for JFK and all this stuff. And that video got almost 500,000 views. And
Wow.
all the corporations that are sponsoring that video, and it's incredible. And then you see like Mark Shaw, who we debunk his nonsense about RFK and Marilyn Monroe. He's got a video with this guy who's proclaims to be an historian, and it's got over 1 million views. I mean, it's incredible the reach that they have in the lies that are out there. And then you read the comments, and it's just unbelievable. People buy this garbage, and they don't look into it themselves. They just believe what they're hearing. And these guys have such a reach, and we're reaching thousands, and they're reaching hundreds of thousands and millions. And that's the problem.
It is, and they just don't try hard enough, guys. There's an article I've got coming up soon on a Lennon witness called Franklin Welsh. And Franklin was one of the passengers who was in the back of Richard Peterson's cab, who was going to Dakota that night. And when Peterson pulled up, Franklin heard gunfire and ran out of Peterson's cab and went into the driveway. And he saw Jose Padermo kick Chapman's alleged gun to the back of the driveway, which where Joe Manny, the basement crew guy, came up and very strangely, very suspiciously took it away and hid it. So just that whole gun theater thing is really odd. But
Sure.
what's interesting about Franklin Welsh is he places Padermo and he places Chapman by the sidewalk. Okay, they're not down the far end. Because think about it, guys, logically. For Padermo to kick Chapman's gun to the back of the driveway, he's got to be at the front of the driveway to do that. And for Welsh to see it. But what's interesting, to get to our point about the media, guys, Franklin Welsh was a really famous, possibly the world's greatest makeup and hairstylist at the time in 1980. He was the guy that Raquel Welch went to in the 70s. He was the guy that Diane Keaton went to. When Vogue wanted to do a big shoot about any famous woman in the world, they would call up Franklin Welsh and he would go and do the hair and makeup. Yet, you put Franklin Welsh into Google, you try and find something about Franklin Welsh and the John Lennon, or just Franklin Welsh in general, actually. The guy's just been completely scrubbed. But if you try and put in what he knew about the Lennon assassination, there's absolutely nothing. He was complete. We only knew about him in 1992 when Jack Jones put his testimony in his book about Bart Chapman. Jack Jones has got a lot of problems, but that was very useful.
Jones has a lot of ties to intelligence, right?
Jones is a Navy intelligence guy, but what he did that was good was he actually must have used his intelligence friends to get him all these statements that we'd never seen before since 1992. And Franklin Welsh was one of those statements. But what's interesting about Franklin is, from the friends that I've managed to locate of him, he died of AIDS somewhere around 82, 83. And like a lot of guys did in those days, he went off quietly to die. Dreadfully tragic guy, actually. Apparently he went to the desert with some guys, some friends who took him there. And he died anonymously, really. And there's no death certificate. There's no birth certificate. Franklin Welsh is a complete ghost. And I spoke to some of his friends about him. And they said, no, he never mentioned the Lennon murder, which is just really odd because he saw a lot. He was there when gunfire was heard in that driveway. So there's something not quite right about Franklin Welsh. He was friends with Sharon Stone. Apparently he helped Sharon Stone in her career. He helped launch her in the late 70s, early 80s. So, there's more to come. There's more. And the point is, nobody is looking into these people and nobody's looking into what these people saw and who they spoke to and what they knew. So, it's the media again, just not doing their job properly. It's so frustrating. And I was kind of shocked, guys, when I got into this and discovered that was the case. It's heartbreaking, really, because the general public deserve better, to be honest.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you, David. But unfortunately, we are where we are, and it's just it's a sad state of affairs right now. But we'll keep pushing, and you'll keep pushing. Your Substack is fantastic. I highly recommend your Substack.
Thank you.
The articles on there are great. And your book, Mind Games, The Assassination of John Lennon, also recommend picking that up to our listeners and our viewers. Sean, anything else before we wrap up today?
Oh, this was fantastic, Dave. Thanks. And hopefully we'll get you back and we'll work on it because there's always new stuff coming up on the Lennon murder and you're on top of everything. So hopefully we get you back and discuss more of it. But I think this was a fantastic discussion tonight. We covered a lot of topics and we got to a lot of the things I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Nice just to come a little bit off the main track for me and talk about other things. You know, I've lived in that Dakota driveway for 4 years now, and I've obviously described that whole murder now so many times. I've got it. Yeah, it's nice to not get too specific about it. But yeah, there is. Thank you, guys, and thanks for the opportunity again to come on your show. There is new stuff coming down the pipe. I am talking to new people. I suppose for better or worse, I've become the John Lennon assassination expert. And I kind of didn't really look to be that, but it's happened, and I've become the hub. And I'm carefully sifting through what's coming my way, and there's a couple of interesting things popping up. There's more to come.
Excellent.
Well, you're welcome back. You're welcome back anytime, David. You know, when you have more information, new information, you're welcome. Certainly on this program.
Yeah, always got a place here, bud.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate that. Keep up with that great work you guys do. Absolutely love your show.
All right. Thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.